Super Mario 64 was a critical hit when it first released, being one of the most important Mario games, if not the most important entry of the entire series, as it brought Mario and gaming into the third dimension and so on and so forth. You get the idea. But after that, Mario kinda took a bit of a break from pure platforming for the most part, with the rest of his catalog on N64 pretty much being on really good spin-offs, and I mean, really good. I still love Paper Mario. But not to say that Nintendo didn't try to make a follow-up to Super Mario 64, because up until 6 years until the next true 3D Mario game release, there were a couple of attempts of making another Mario game. With one of the first ones is pretty much a straightforward sequel for the N64 disk drive. With one of the main ideas for the game is a playable Luigi after being pretty much absent from Mario 64. And their next goal, and this is probably their biggest one, and so during the N64 days, Miyamoto had stated in the past that he's not really too keen on Mario being towards a younger demographic. So for the early concepts on this proposal new Mario game, they wanted to try and mature up the series. And he was pretty confident on this idea that he even talked about it in public interviews. And not via something like an E3 conference or a TV interview or a Nintendo Power Paper Monthly, but a freaking Playboy magazine interview, where he states that it's going to be a completely new experience. However, plans for this project were eventually dropped shortly. And honestly, thank God for that, because a 3D Mario game aiming for a mature audience sounds like a terrible idea. But after that, there was also this idea for a 3D Mario game called Super Mario 128, which basically shows the technology of the GameCube, but it pretty much got converted to a different Nintendo series with Pikmin. But eventually, after some attempts, they were finally able to pick up an idea for a new Mario game. And so after 6 years of Mario 64 being around, we finally got a brand new 3D Mario game with Super Mario Sunshine. And just like any other mainline Mario game, it pretty much received universal acclaim throughout, being considered one of the best games on the Nintendo GameCube and another great addition to its everlasting library. But as for my personal history, I grew up playing this game a lot when I was little, as it was one of the first games I ever played. So I have a lot of nostalgic memory of this game, both good and not good. And as similar to something like Super Mario 64, this game over the years became a bit more mixed with fan reception, with some of the aspects being pretty dated. Which is pretty understandable because at the time, the earliest Nintendo GameCube releases had a bit of more growing pains. But I feel like this reception especially got tested when Super Mario 3D All-Stars released for the Nintendo Switch, which is an HD compilation of the first 3D Mario games with Sunshine included, and it's the version I'm going to be focusing on for this video, as it's pretty much the same game in terms of graphics, gameplay, and tweaks, but this time it's in widescreen and such, so it's going to be a bit more convenient. But with everything out of the way, let's get started. So the story begins with Mario, Peach, and Toadsworth flying high in the sky as they head for a little vacation on a tropical island called Isle Delfino. As the group watches a small PA about what the resort has to offer, Peach notices that a mysterious shadowy figure that looks like Mario appears on the screen. However, he and Toadsworth are too busy daydreaming on the resort to notice. However, once they arrive on the island, their landing ended up being rocky as there's this mysterious goop all over the airstrip. And while they try to investigate, Peach notices the same shadowy figure from before that suddenly vanishes into thin air. Mario tries to ask all the locals what's going on, but they could all say is that this is all Mario's fault. And so they then tell him to use this special thing to clean up the mess, which is a device called FLUDD, the Flash Liquidizer Ultra Dowsing Device, which is pretty much a robotic watering pump that Mario uses throughout the adventure. And after he finishes cleaning up the airport as well as finding this painted piranha plant, Mario finds a mysterious sun star that he picks up, and while he tries to talk with Peach and Toadsworth on what's going on, two police officers then arrive to arrest Mario and send him to court, where they explain that a mysterious criminal has arrived covering the entire island in goop, which is polluting the entirety of the Pianta's home, as the entire island goes under chaos when the source of their powers, the Shine Sprites, vanishes across the island, causing an eclipse within Delfino Plaza. And the person responsible with this situation, according to eyewitnesses, stated that it's been Mario's doing, with Peach and Toadsworth unable to defend Mario in this scenario. And so the judge declares Mario guilty and charges him to community service, meaning that he's unable to leave the island until he can fix this situation. And so the next morning, during his first day of cleanup duty, he tries to clean up this goop around this statue area, where he was able to find the real culprit behind this whole thing. An evil blue doppelganger of Mario called Shadow Mario, who immediately goes after Peach, but luckily Mario was able to take care of him, and he was able to chase him down through this goop portal. And so, it's now up to Mario to travel across different parts of Isle Delfino to fix all the problems caused by Shadow Mario. The story in this game, honestly, despite being straightforward like other Mario games, has frankly a way more interesting setup compared to the usual Peach getting kidnapped thing. Now granted, even though that story beat does occur later on in this game, but for the first quarter of this game, your main goal is just trying to clear Mario's name. And once Peach actually does get kidnapped, this is when the plot gets a bit more interesting, as it turns out that Shadow Mario is really Bowser Jr., Bowser's very own son, who makes his grand debut in this game being the main culprit behind the pollution of Isle Delfino. With his main reasoning is that Bowser told him that Mario is the villain that's trying to kidnap his mother, with Peach being very confused on the whole thing. So instead of fighting Mario head on, they decide this time to try and frame Mario into being the criminal across the island. That way, with Mario in jail, no one will be able to rescue Peach. And this is all thanks to this magical paintbrush Bowser Jr. owns, which is a device that Professor Egad made, as well as Flood. And I like how he's not even here in this game, but you can tell that this is all of his doing thanks to his iconography. And also, as you can tell, this is one of the fewer times where you can see full-on voice acting in a Mario game. Which is honestly very rare, because the only other time I could think of with a mainline Mario game to have full-on voice acting are probably Super Mario 64 and Mario Wonder, but both of them were very limited to certain characters. And as for the acting itself though, it does have that early 2000s cam to it, which, I'll be completely honest, is a performance I honestly really adore.
But why would you pretend to be Mario?
Papa told me everything. He said, Mario's a bully, he never fights fair. He said, Junior, you gotta try to outsmart Mario.
Frankly, the line deliveries on some of these characters really carry this game throughout. Especially with Mario, surprisingly, because even though he doesn't speak a lot, the line deliveries Charles does in this game is pretty funny.
Aren't I done yet? There's more? Another door?
That shadow.
And also, do you find it weird that both Mario and Sonic's secondary 3D entry both have similar traits? I mean, both characters got arrested by being framed by a character named Shadow, with the only big difference is that one of these is a very good game, while the other one is a really good game. Alrighty, so for the gameplay. As I mentioned before, Super Mario Sunshine is basically the follow-up of Mario 64, meaning most of Mario's moveset from that game returns in this one. So his acrobatic skills like the triple jump and dive pretty much works exactly the same, although for the wall jump, this one had a bit of an update. Compared to Mario 64 where it had a bit of a learning curve where it's a bit more precise, in Super Mario Sunshine they give you way more breathing room as Mario slowly slides down before activating the wall jump, which is a very effective change that Mario still keeps to this very day. And finally we have one brand new move added to this game, which is the spin jump. Now this one originally started in Super Mario World, but it got its first ever 3D debut in Sunshine. With this move you're able to jump through greater heights very quickly, with the only hurdle is that you need to spin the joystick around and time it correctly, pretty much a risk and reward factor. But I've got to say, once you get a hang of it, it is frankly very satisfying to use it. Especially with the long jump, one of the big staples of a 3D Mario game is absent in this game, but honestly I'm not really too bothered for it because how versatile Mario's move is in this game anyway. Especially since before Odyssey, I always consider Super Mario Sunshine as the best controlling 3D Mario game ever, as it has the right amount of weight and momentum to make it feel very natural, especially when you're trying to explore these vast areas. And this is not even talking about the main aspect of Sunshine, which is Flood, which is the primary focus in this game as this thing is very versatile. And what's neat is that they even show you a full motion video about how to control this thing, so I'm just gonna play that instead.
Use the button to shoot water from my tank. You press the button, you can stop and shoot. You can then press the button, refill tank, enter a body of water, and press the button.
Alright, so for the very default form Flood can use is pretty much just a simple water spray. Which does sound very simple, but you can find a lot of secrets by spraying across the world. Like if you spray an open window or a wanted sign, you'll get rewarded with a coin. Same thing with these special birds that'll reward you with goodies if you spray them down enough. But the primary thing you'll be using with this sprayer is pretty much cleaning up the goop of Isle Delfino, which frankly has a weird satisfying gameplay loop into it. Like with some exceptions, you don't really have to clean the entirety of the areas, but it just feels very nice to clean up the place. Although for some reason when I was little, I always thought the goop in this game was either chocolate or yogurt. So instead of trying to clean up the area, I just had Mario just going and even drowning some characters into the goop, in the delicious, fruity looking goop. But going back to FLUDD, another thing that this thing can do is transform it to different nozzles, like the secondary one we have here is the hover nozzle. And it's probably going to be the main thing you'll be using as it allows Mario to hover across the area for a brief moment. Very useful for a sandbox platformer like this, especially when you combine with Mario's already very fluid moveset. But another thing we can have is the turbo nozzle, which allows Mario to run super fast to the point where he can even run on water. Very useful for the areas that are much more wider. And finally, we have the jet nozzle, which allows Mario to launch pretty much high up in the air, which is very useful for much more elevated levels like Noki Bay. And overall, I feel like the FLUDD mechanic in this game is utilized very well throughout. I do feel like the turbo nozzle could have been used a bit more, because I feel like a lot of times, even though it's a very fun tool to use, it does feel a bit situational on the things you need to do. Especially with the various areas you'll be exploring throughout this game. Alrighty, so with Super Mario 64, there were about 15 courses with about 7 main collectibles in each of them. However, with Sunshine, the amount of levels in this game are way fewer than 64, from going from 15 to only 8 areas, with one of them being the main hub of this game, Delfino Plaza. But despite the fewer numbers of actual areas, I feel like the levels themselves are way bigger than the ones in Mario 64, as you're going to be doing a lot more stuff within them. Bianco Hills is a very nice first level, as it shows you pretty much the ropes on what you'll be doing in this game, as it's divided into 2 separate areas, with one of them being a small little village, while the other place is in a lakeside, with the main centerpiece being this giant windmill. Rico Harbor is a really cool location as you platform through a lot of different fences, or travel above the ground via these girders. And what I really adore about this place, as it really takes full advantage of Mario's moveset. I mean, with the very first mission you have to go through, you could just go through this small little platforming area, or if you think outside the box and do a well-timed triple jump, you could get through the area with ease. And as for Gelato Beach, this is one of the more simpler areas of the game that constantly changes depending on which mission you can go through. Especially compared to something like Pita Park, where this is pretty much a giant jungle gym for Mario, as you pretty much use the different rides of this amusement park as your very own platformer to get all these collectibles. Then there's Serena Beach, which has you going through this haunted hotel full of booze and compulsive gambling. And Noki Bay is located on this cliffside full of secret passages that you need to use FLUDD to go through. And it's also probably the most platformer heavy of the areas. And finally we have Pianta Village, which is probably the most dangerous area of the game, as it's the only one with actual bottomless pits. They even have a simple day and night cycle for when every mission it's daytime, while every other mission it's nighttime. And overall, even though that there isn't as much as the previous games, I feel like they do a really great job on making every single area of this game feel very unique. And I can't really say that there's any genuine sour spots in this game. Like, I know people didn't really like stuff like Rainbow Ride or Tick-Tock Clock from 64. But in Sunshine, all of these are really good, and they have so much to do with them because unlike 64 where there's only about 7 stars to collect, in Sunshine there's about 11 in each area. And all of them try to do something very unique from one another, like Bianco Hills for example, where you need to climb all the way up to this windmill and face off Petey Piranha, which is another character that debuted in Sunshine. In Rico Harbor, there's this one mission where your main goal is trying to get the Shine Sprite within this cage. And I feel like what works with this area is it shows a great example on the freedom of choice you have in Sunshine. If you want to be very traditional, you can just platform all these girders, or you could find this special jet nozzle to have you launch into the cage instantly. And this freedom of thinking outside the box is really felt throughout this game. With another great example is that in this one level in Pianta Village, FLUDD is taken away for you and you need to go around this fiery goop, and what I do is just splash some water around to get a good path. And then there's the various secret levels you can find throughout the world, which is the most platform heavy levels in this game as FLUDD is taken away from you, so now you have to rely on Mario's much more raw moveset. And honestly, these are probably my favorite parts of this game, especially with Noki Bay's secret level, as the platforming in this area is really good with a nice difficulty curve. And besides one exception, all the levels in this game really took full advantage of Mario's moveset. And what's also nice is that there's also a bonus sprite you can get if you revisit the area, because once you complete it regularly, you'll have FLUDD in this level. So now instead of trying to platform in the area, you're trying to race scale the red coins under a strict time limit, with some of them can be very insane. I mean, with one of these, I literally had 1 millisecond away from losing. And then there's a couple of levels in this game where it requires you to ride on Yoshi. Yes, after being a small cameo in Mario 64, Yoshi makes his rideable debut in this game, where throughout El Delfino you'll find Yoshi eggs that ask you to get a certain fruit, and when you give it to them, it'll hatch a Yoshi. And he pretty much works exactly as you expect him to do, as he runs a lot faster, jumps higher, and he can use his tongue to eat up enemies. And when I mean he can jump higher, I mean he can get some crazy distance. He can also spit up juice out of his stomach. What an interesting way to put in the FLUDD mechanic. And it even affects the various enemies in this game as well by turning them into platforming blocks. With the only big weakness Yoshi has is if he runs out of juice, he'll then evaporate. Similar if he goes into water, he'll just dissolve. Which can be very frustrating, especially with one of these levels requires you to get a special fruit that's very hard to find. Which leads to me some bigger criticisms that Sunshine has over the years. So if the main appeal of Super Mario 64 is that you can go through any kind of level in any order you want. So if you don't like a certain star, you can just skip it and do another one to get enough stars to unlock the gate. Meaning that you can essentially skip through entire areas of the game like Rainbow Ride. But with Super Mario Sunshine, it is way more railroaded. Meaning that every single 8th mission in this game is the only one that was truly optional. Because in order to beat through the game, you need to go through the 7th mission in every area in the game, which is the one with Shadow Mario in it. But on a personal note, I'm not really too bothered with the much more railroaded setup. Because firstly, I'm gonna go through the levels in order anyway, but I can understand why people don't like this setup. Especially that even though I said that most of the missions in this game are very good, some of them in this game are something else entirely.
I'm a chuckster. Murder!
With some of the missions in this game, they could be a bit annoying. Like in one of the casino areas, you have to flip all the tiles and it's very sensitive with the water. But when they get bad, they really get bad. With the most egregious ones so happen to be the various secret levels you can find in Delfino Plaza themselves. With one of the most infamous one, and the one I hate the most, is this one where you have to have Yoshi travel on these slow-ass boats on this small island to remove this goop. And that's just trying to enter a level, because the level itself is even worse. You have to have Mario travel on this lily pad and get all the red coins, and you can't go into water, otherwise it'll instantly kill you. That one sucked, but with something like the watermelon escort mission that I've seen a lot of people talk about, I thought this one was just fine. Trying to move around this watermelon feels like total ass though, because these things might as well be balloons because how easily they can pop. But with these, I was able to get the Shining Sprite pretty well because all you have to do is just go through the certain path. But there is one mission that did annoy me in Jalal Beach, and it's not the watermelon or the sandbird, it's the freaking economy. Because just like 64, you get a special Shining Sprite if you get 100 coins. I always find this mission and other levels in this game very fun, but with Gelato Beach, that's the one exception because how scarce the coins are in this area. So at the near end, I was just pretty much grinding out with coins by breaking all the watermelons as I could. And another thing too is that Sunshine has a weird tendency of having experimental ideas. Like in Rico Harbor, you have these special rideable bloopers Mario can ride on to go fast as he can, and it does lead to a really fun Shine Sprite as you race across this course. However, the second time you use the blooper, you're now asked to go through these tight areas, and every time you bump into something, Mario will instantly die. And in Noki Bay, there are some areas where Mario needs to go underwater with this special helmet. Because the main conflict here is that the water in Noki Bay has been poisoned by pollution, and so Mario needs to find the source. Which so happens to be this giant eel that Mario needs to clean his teeth. And then there's the pachinko machine. And I swear to God, I feel like they programmed this area to be total luck base. because this is easily one of the worst levels I've ever played in a Mario game, and a good representation on why Sunshine is a bit more mixed compared to other Mario games. As just like Super Mario 64, Sunshine does suffer a lot of janky aspects, mostly due to the fact of making a completely new game on brand new hardware. But at the same time, I feel like the hate for Sunshine has become a bit way overblown over the years. Like, I understand why people might not be big on this game, but I've seen so many people over the years who unironically states that this is one of the buggiest games ever made. Now, with that statement, I just say that's just straight up bullshit. Sunshine is a janky game, but you're gonna have those snags once every blue moon. But compared to an actual broken game is a different story because the bugs in those types of games are way more occurring. Compared to a game that's just a bit more janky, you can still have a lot of fun with them. I mean, hell, the most acclaimed Nintendo title on GameCube is a very janky game as well. But it didn't matter because at its core, it was still a fundamentally fun game. The janky aspects didn't really hurt the game at all. In fact, Smash Players fully embraces the aspect, which is why we have stuff like wave dashing, for example. And I think Sunshine is like Melee in that aspect. But for most of the bugs in Sunshine, you really need to go out of your way to do so. But honestly, intentionally doing some of these glitches can be very fun. In fact, with some of the glitches you can intentionally do, you can make the more infamous levels in Sunshine way easier to go through. Like that infamous lily pad level where you have to ride Yoshi on these slow boats. All you have to do is intentionally try to have Yoshi clip through this wall, and now bada bing, you can now travel the island very quickly now. The lily pad level still sucks though, but at the very least trying to get to it is way easier to do through. In fact, this exploit kind of reminds me a lot of the famous BLJs from Mario 64. I feel like the main problem with Mario Sunshine is that I think this game is good on a casual one, but when you go for 100% is when you see the cracks of this game. Because if you really think about it, stuff like the Pachinko Machine, Lily Pad, and Watermelon stuff are the few Shine Sprites that are completely optional. However, once you are able to get every single Shine Sprite in this game, you'll notice that you can only go up to only 96 Shine Sprites. And in Mario Sunshine, there's a total of 120 Shine Sprites. That's because throughout the game, you'll find these special blue coins that if you collect a certain enough of them, you can buy even more Shine Sprites. There's about 30 in each of the areas, and finding them all requires for that 100% playthrough. This aspect of Sunshine I'm a bit more mixed on, because in practice they're pretty much similar to the moons in Odyssey, where you really need to go through every nook and cranny to find them all. But on the other hand, some of these blue coins are too vague to figure out how to find them, especially with some of them being locked under certain missions, with barely any good hints to find them. It's a similar reason why the aforementioned moons get so much flack these days, because since there are so many of them, it just feels like total padding. But I do have to say is that collecting every single one of them does feel a bit satisfying, especially when you find that final blue coin and pay the raccoon all the Shine Sprites. And seeing that counter go all the way up to 120 frankly does feel good. But going back to a much more positive note, so for the presentation of Super Mario Sunshine, you know, for a 2002 game, Super Mario Sunshine looks really good for the GameCube. And frankly still looks really good to this very day. And it's all thanks to its very strong art style. Like, I really adore how much they push in that tropical resort vibe in this game. Compared to other 3 Mario games where the settings were pretty much focused on different biomes like desert, snow, grass, in Mario Sunshine you're traveling through a small village, going into a harbor, and even exploring an entire amusement park. Which really gives this game a true summer feel to it. In fact, I usually play this game annually every summer. And what I love too is that everything in this game are completely interconnected. Like the moment you head into Bianco Hills, if you look behind you, you can see Ricco Harbor below you. And once you launch all the way to Peanut Park, you can see all of Serena Beach, Gelato Beach, Ricco Harbor, and even Delfino Plaza within one swoop. It truly gives you a good feel that these are actual locations and not just simply like a Mario level. Doubly so with the brand new characters introduced to this game like the Piantas and Nokis. Like they all have this really fun and bouncy vibe to them. I know some of the NPCs in this game could be a bit rude to Mario, especially in Delfino Plaza, but keep in mind is that Mario is an alleged criminal in this game. But as for the various enemies, I like how they're mostly regular Mario enemies, but they have a weird, tropical, zany twist to them. Like you're not going to be seeing any Goombas in this game, instead you're going to see these things called strolling studs. The Koopas in this game are a lot more tricky to take down because their shell this time have an electric field, so you need to attack them when they launch their shell at you. The bloopers in this game has way longer tentacles than usual, and the bombs here are a bit more robotic as they pretty much look like a digital alarm clock. And as for the bosses, I already mentioned how much I really adore PD Piranha's design, and doubly so for Gooper Blooper, although I do kind of find it a bit morbid that we're slowly ripping off this guy's tentacles. But I think the strangest bosses I can think of in this game have to be the two from Serena Beach. With the first one, you have to fight off this giant ghostly manta ray, where you need to spray him multiple times to the point where he just becomes tiny little bits of himself. And then there's King Boo, who runs a ghostly casino underground, which really gives a good example on the weird stylized look some of the Mario enemies have in this game. But going back for the graphics itself though, you know that big meme back in the Wii U days about how Nintendo's good at making water? Well, this game right here is pretty much the start of that trend, as the water in this game looks really good, even to this very day. Like, it has this really tantalizing look to it, like, man, I want to drink that water. Same thing with the fruits, I mean, like, my god, do they have to make it look that good? Alrighty, so when everything is said and done and after you get all of Shadow Mario stages, it's time to head for the final parts of this game as the entirety of Delfino Plaza has been flooded. But luckily the passageway where Shadow Mario is hidden is opened, and so it's time for the final gauntlet challenge in Corona Mountain, which easily has the most deadliest hazards in this game, with spikes and fires everywhere that will instantly kill Mario if he touches them. Ending things off with a small boat section. That's frankly very awkward to control through, and if you bump into just one thing, it'll instantly go down, pretty much killing you instantly. But this section isn't too bad as long as you don't go through all the 10 blue coins that are scattered across the area. So just ignore them and grab onto that jet nozzle as you launch all the way up to the air until you meet with Bowser in his floating jacuzzi. Yes, I'm not kidding, the final boss of this game is Bowser in his hot tub. And what's even weirder is that he even speaks full sentences in this game as well.
Mario! How dare you disturb my family vacation?
And so the final battle pursues as you need to ground pound the corner areas of the hot tub so it can tilt and fall, while you try to avoid the various bullet bills in Bowser's fire. And frankly, even though this boss fight itself is very easy, it is honestly very fun to go through. Especially when you're trying your best not to fall off the platform as everything is literally falling apart. But when everything is all said and done and you've done the final blow, you're able to claim the final Shine Sprite as you defeat both Bowser and Jr. But destroying that giant hot tub really took a number on FLUDD as it starts malfunctioning.
Mario, was I,
And so, with Bowser and Jr. gone, the entirety of Delfino Plaza has been restored back to its power, with the entirety of the Piantas and Nokis celebrating. But as for the two Koopas, well, Bowser decided to have a father and son talk with Bowser Jr.
Junior, I've got something difficult to tell you about Princess Peach.
I know, she's not really my mama. Someday, when I'm bigger, I wanna fight that Mario again.
That's my boy. Well put, son. The Royal Koopa line is as strong as ever. But for now, let's just rest a while.
I do not know why, but I always find that moment very wholesome for some reason. So yeah, the day is saved, FLUDD turns out to be fine, and Mario and Peach goes on to their vacation, concluding Super Mario Sunshine. And overall, despite the much more dated aspects of this game, I still think that this game is still very good and holds up to this very day for the most part, as there's just a certain vibe to Mario Sunshine that you really don't see in other Mario games. It has a very much more cozy vibe to it. And while this game does have plenty of low points, I feel like they're a bit too far in between to really affect this game, as there's just so many great things about Sunshine that allows you to really overlook some of the flaws. Hell, dare I say, this is probably my third favorite 3D Mario game of all time, right behind games like Super Mario 64 and Galaxy. If you're very curious on Super Mario Sunshine, then I highly recommend trying it out. It may not be everyone's cup of tea on what they want out of a Mario game, but personally, I feel like it really sticks the landing. From the beautiful tropical settings to the fun platforming. And despite all the flaws this game has, I feel like this game is still a worthy addition to Mario's everlasting library. But as for the next video, according to the polls, it seems like we're going to be going back to the Shantae series for Shantae and the Pirate's Curse. I've never actually played this game before, but I've heard a lot of great things about it, so I'm very curious on. But that'll do for today, so thank you for watching and I'll see you later. Bye bye!